I woke up that Tuesday morning to find construction equipment parked along the creek that ran through my property. And my first thought was that someone was about to have a very bad day. My name is Robert Sanders, and I had lived on my 12-acre property in rural Loudoun County, Virginia, for 8 years. The house sat on a hill overlooking a beautiful creek that meandered through the woods, creating a natural border between my land and the neighboring properties. I had specifically purchased this property because of its privacy and the creek, which I maintained and cared for meticulously. The water ran clear over smooth stones, and deer would come down to drink in the early mornings. It was my sanctuary. I grabbed my coffee and walked down the gravel path toward the creek, squinting against the morning sun. There were 2 trucks, a small excavator, and about 6 people milling around near the water. As I got closer, I could see they were already setting posts into the ground on both sides of the creek. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice loud enough to carry over the sound of the equipment. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" A man in a hard hat turned around, clipboard in hand. He looked annoyed at being interrupted. "We're building a walking bridge. Should be done by end of day." "A walking bridge," I repeated slowly, feeling my blood pressure rising. "On my land, over my creek. And who authorized this?" "The HOA," he said, checking his clipboard. "We got the work order last week. It's all approved." I felt my jaw clench. "I don't give a damn what the HOA approved. This is my private property. You need to stop work immediately and get off my land." The foreman sighed like he had dealt with this 1,000 times before. "Look, buddy, I just do what I'm told. You got a problem, take it up with your HOA. We got a signed contract and permits. Permits for my property. That's impossible because I never signed anything." He shrugged and turned back to his crew, dismissing me entirely. I stood there for a moment, rage building in my chest. I pulled out my phone and called the HOA office. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, this is Brenda speaking." "This is Robert Sanders on Hickory Lane. There's a construction crew on my property right now building some kind of bridge over my creek, and I want to know what the hell is going on." There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. "Oh yes, Mr. Sanders. The Community Walking Trail Extension. It was approved at last month's board meeting." I wasn't at last month's board meeting, and nobody asked my permission to build anything on my land. "Well, Mr. Sanders, according to our bylaws, the HOA has the authority to implement community improvements that benefit the neighborhood. The walking trail has been very popular, and extending it to connect Oak Ridge Drive with Maple Court will provide residents with better access to nature and exercise opportunities." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Let me be very clear. My property is not part of your walking trail. The creek runs through my land. I own it. You cannot just build on it without my permission. Actually, Mr. Sanders, if you review your property deed, you'll see that the HOA maintains certain easement rights for community purposes. The bridge falls within those parameters." "That's not how easements work," I said, my voice rising. "Those are for utilities and emergency access, not for building recreational facilities. I'm sorry you feel that way, but the decision has been made. The bridge will benefit everyone in the community, including increasing your property value. You should be thanking us." I hung up before I said something I would regret. I marched back down to the creek where the workers had already set 4 posts and were preparing to lay crossbeams. I stood directly in front of the foreman. "I'm telling you one more time. Stop work and leave my property or I'm calling the sheriff." He looked at me, then at his crew, then back at me. "You do what you got to do. I got a contract to fulfill." I called the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office and explained the situation. They said they would send a deputy out, but it might be a couple of hours. By the time I got off the phone, the crew had laid 2 of the crossbeams and were starting on the decking. I walked back up to my house and went straight to my filing cabinet where I kept all my property documents. I pulled out the deed and read through it carefully. There was indeed an easement clause, but it was specifically for utility access and emergency services, exactly as I remembered. Nothing about community improvements or walking trails. I made copies of the relevant pages. An hour later, Deputy Martinez showed up. I met him at the top of the driveway and walked him down to the creek. The bridge was taking shape now, a sturdy wooden structure about 12 feet long and 4 feet wide, spanning the narrowest part of the creek. "So what's the situation?" Deputy Martinez asked, notebook in hand. I explained everything, showed him my property deed, and pointed out the easement language. He read through it carefully, then walked over to talk to the construction foreman. They spoke for about 10 minutes while I waited, getting more frustrated by the second. Finally, Deputy Martinez came back. "Mr. Sanders, this is a civil matter. The foreman has a contract with the HOA and says he was told all the proper permissions were obtained. You'll need to sort this out with your HOA or take them to court. I can't stop them from working unless you have a court order." "But it's my property," I protested. "I understand your frustration, but without a judge saying otherwise, my hands are tied. This is a property dispute, not a criminal matter." He gave me a sympathetic look and headed back to his patrol car. I stood there watching the workers for another hour. By noon, the bridge was essentially complete. They were adding railings and doing finishing touches. It was actually a well-built structure, I had to admit, but that just made me angrier. They had come onto my land without permission and built something permanent. When the crew finally packed up and left around 2 in the afternoon, I walked out onto the bridge. It was solid, the lumber was good quality pressure-treated wood, and the construction was professional. I stood in the middle, looking down at my creek, feeling violated. This was my space, my sanctuary, and now it had been turned into a public thoroughfare. I went back inside and started researching property law. I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening reading Virginia statutes, HOA regulations, and easement law. The more I read, the more certain I became that the HOA had overstepped its authority. The easement in my deed did not cover this type of construction. The next morning, I called 3 different real estate attorneys. The first 2 were booked solid, but the third, a lawyer named Michael Chen, agreed to see me that afternoon. I drove to his office in Leesburg with all my documents. Michael was in his 40s, sharp-eyed and methodical. He read through my deed, the HOA bylaws, and the meeting minutes I had requested and received via email that morning. After about 30 minutes, he looked up. "You're right," he said. "The HOA doesn't have the authority to build this bridge on your property. The easement doesn't cover it. But here's the problem. Getting a judge to order them to remove it could take months and cost you $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, maybe more if they fight it hard. So what are my options? You could sue for damages and removal. You'd probably win, but it's going to be expensive and time-consuming. Or you could try to negotiate with the HOA, maybe get them to pay you for the easement or reroute the trail. Or," he paused, "you could remove it yourself. It's your property and they built an unpermitted structure on it. Technically, you'd be within your rights. If I remove it myself, what happens? They might sue you for the cost of the bridge, but you'd have a strong defense since they built it on your land without proper authorization. It would probably end up about the same place legally, but you'd save the time and money of going through the removal process through the courts." I thought about it for a moment. What if I document everything thoroughly? Photos, videos, save all communications. That would definitely help your case. Look, Mr. Sanders, I'm going to be honest with you. HOAs can be nightmares to deal with. They often think they have more power than they actually do, and they count on homeowners not wanting to fight back because it's expensive. If you remove the bridge yourself, you're calling their bluff. I paid Michael for the consultation and drove home. I spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. I took dozens of photos of the bridge from every angle, recorded video walking across it and around it, and compiled all my emails and documentation into a folder. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that bridge, about the violation of my property rights, about the HOA's assumption that they could just do whatever they wanted. By the time the sun came up Thursday morning, I had made my decision. I owned a decent collection of tools. I had a reciprocating saw, a crowbar, a sledgehammer, and work gloves. I started at dawn before anyone would be out on the trails. The bridge was well built, which meant it was also well fastened. I started with the railings, using the reciprocating saw to cut through the bolts. The sound echoed through the quiet morning woods, loud and angry. It took me about 20 minutes to remove both railings. I carried them up to my barn and came back for the decking. The deck boards were screwed down tight, but with the right drill bit, they came up reasonably easily. I worked steadily, methodically, stacking the lumber as I went. By 8 in the morning, I had removed all the decking and was starting on the cross beams. That's when I heard someone shouting, "What do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a woman in her late 40s power walking toward me with the fury of 1,000 suns in her eyes. She was wearing a designer tracksuit and had that haircut, the one that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." I knew exactly who she was before she even introduced herself. Karen Whitmore, HOA president. "I'm removing an unauthorized structure from my property," I said calmly, continuing to work. "That is community property. That bridge was built for the entire neighborhood. That bridge was built on my land without my permission. I'm taking it down." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of purple. "You can't do this. We spent $8,000 on that bridge. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said. "I've already talked to them. This is a civil matter." She pulled out her phone and started jabbing at it furiously. I kept working. The crossbeams were heavier and required more effort, but I managed to get them loose and drag them up to the barn. By the time Deputy Martinez showed up again, I had removed everything except the support posts. "Mr. Sanders," he said with a sigh, "we've got to stop meeting like this." "Deputy." "As you can see, I'm removing an unauthorized structure from my property." Karen rushed over. "Officer, arrest this man. He's destroying community property." "Madam, as I explained yesterday, this is a civil matter. If the HOA believes they have a right to build here, they need to get a court order. Mr. Sanders believes this is his property, and he has the right to remove structures built without his permission. This is outrageous. I'm going to sue him for every penny." Deputy Martinez looked tired. "You folks need to work this out with lawyers or through the courts. I can't arrest anyone over a property line dispute." He turned to me. "Mr. Sanders, I'd recommend you get legal representation." "Already done," I said. After they left, I finished removing the support posts. It took a chainsaw and a lot of sweat, but by noon, there was nothing left of the bridge except some disturbed earth and holes where the posts had been. I spent another hour smoothing out the ground and replanting some grass seed. You'd barely know anything had been there. I had a barn full of good pressure-treated lumber. The wood alone was worth a couple $1,000s. I posted it on Craigslist that afternoon. Pressure-treated lumber for sale, good condition, various sizes. By evening, I had 3 inquiries. A contractor came by Friday morning and looked at the pile. "This is good wood," he said. "I'll give you $2,000 for the lot." "Sold," I said. We loaded it into his truck and he handed me a check. That afternoon, I got a certified letter from the HOA. It was a formal demand to cease and desist from interfering with community property, along with a notice that I was being fined $5,000 for unauthorized removal of HOA improvements and would be responsible for the $8,000 cost of rebuilding the bridge. I called Michael Chen. "They're threatening to fine me and make me pay for rebuilding." "Expected," he said. "Don't pay anything. I'll draft a response. In the meantime, document everything they send you." His response letter was a thing of beauty. It laid out in precise legal language why the HOA had violated my property rights, cited the specific limitations of the easement, and demanded that the HOA cease all trespassing on my property. It also noted that I was within my rights to remove the unauthorized structure and that any fines would be challenged. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The following Tuesday, I came home from running errands to find that someone had dumped about 6 cubic yards of mulch directly in my driveway, blocking access to my garage. There was no delivery slip, no explanation, just a massive pile of mulch. I called the HOA office. "Did you authorize someone to dump mulch in my driveway?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Brenda said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "I hired a guy with a bobcat to come move it, costing me $300. I added it to my documentation. 2 days later, I got a notice that my lawn was in violation of HOA standards, and I was being fined $200 for excessive growth. My lawn was perfectly maintained. I took photos with that day's newspaper visible to timestamp it. Then my mailbox disappeared, just gone one morning. I filed a police report for theft and installed a camera system pointing at the street. The harassment continued for 2 weeks. Someone kept putting dog waste in bags on my porch even though I didn't own a dog. My garbage cans were tipped over every Tuesday night before trash pickup. Someone filed a false complaint with the county saying I was running an illegal business from my home, which resulted in an inspector showing up. But the cameras caught something interesting. On Thursday evening at 8:15, Karen Whitmore herself drove by slowly, and someone in her passenger seat threw a bag of trash onto my lawn. I had it in perfect high-definition video. I called Michael. "I've got video evidence of HOA harassment." "Send it to me," he said. This changes things. He filed a formal complaint with the HOA's management company and sent copies of the video to the board members. He also sent a letter threatening legal action for harassment if it didn't stop immediately. The harassment stopped, but the legal war was just beginning. The HOA filed a lawsuit against me in Loudoun County Circuit Court for the cost of the bridge and associated fines, totaling $15,000. I countersued for trespassing, unauthorized construction, harassment, and legal fees. The discovery process took 3 months. Both sides exchanged mountains of documents. The HOA produced their meeting minutes, which showed they had approved the walking trail extension project, but made no mention of obtaining property owner permission or verifying easement rights. They had simply assumed they had the authority. Michael deposed Karen Whitmore. I got to read the transcript and it was enlightening. When asked if she had verified they had the legal right to build on my property, she said, "We're the HOA. We have easement rights." "Did you review Mr. Sanders' specific easement language?" "No." "Our bylaws allow for community improvements. But did you verify that Mr. Sanders' deed allowed for this specific type of construction?" I assumed our lawyer had checked that. "Did you ask your lawyer to check it?" Long pause. "No." It turned out the HOA had never consulted with an attorney before approving the project. Karen had simply decided they had the authority and pushed it through a board vote. The other 3 board members had trusted her judgment. Michael also discovered that the HOA had violated their own bylaws. Any expenditure over $5,000 required a vote of the full membership, not just the board. The bridge had cost $8,000, but they had never put it to a membership vote. We went to mediation in August. The HOA was represented by a lawyer they had finally hired, a nervous young guy named Preston who looked like he knew his clients were in trouble. Karen was there, along with 2 other board members. I sat with Michael. The mediator was a retired judge named Patricia Hoffman. She listened to both sides present their cases, reviewed the key documents, and then gave her assessment. Folks, I'm going to be frank. The HOA made several significant errors here. First, you built on Mr. Sanders' property without verifying you had the legal right to do so. The easement in question clearly doesn't cover this type of construction. Second, you violated your own bylaws by not putting this to a membership vote. Third, the harassment documented by Mr. Sanders is concerning and potentially actionable. Karen started to interrupt, but Judge Hoffman held up her hand. However, Mr. Sanders, you did remove property that the HOA had paid for, even if it was improperly placed. There's an argument that you should have waited for a court order rather than taking matters into your own hands. With respect, Michael said, Mr. Sanders was removing an unauthorized structure from his own property. He had every right to do so. Perhaps, Judge Hoffman said, but it complicates the settlement. Here's what I recommend. The HOA drops all fines and claims against Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders drops his harassment and legal fee claims. Everyone walks away and we call it a learning experience. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. They trespassed on my property, built something without permission, and then harassed me for weeks when I removed it. I want compensation for my time, my legal fees, and the violation of my property rights. Karen stood up. We're not paying this man a penny. He destroyed community property. Judge Hoffman looked at Karen. Mrs. Whitmore, I strongly suggest you reconsider. If this goes to trial, you're going to lose. The law is very clear about property rights, and you don't have a leg to stand on. Furthermore, if you lose at trial, you'll be responsible for Mr. Sanders' legal fees, which will be substantially higher than they are now. The HOA will also likely face additional damages. The mediation broke up without a settlement. Karen was determined to fight. We went to trial in November. The courthouse in Leesburg was busy that Monday morning, but our case was called in the afternoon. Judge Raymond Blackburn presided. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Michael presented our case methodically. He showed the property deed, highlighted the easement language, and explained why it didn't cover the bridge construction. He presented evidence that the HOA had never consulted an attorney or verified their rights. He showed the timeline of harassment, including the video of Karen's car. The HOA's lawyer, Preston, did his best. He argued that the easement should be interpreted broadly for community benefit. He claimed I had overreacted by removing the bridge. He tried to minimize the harassment as coincidental events. Judge Blackburn listened to everything, asked pointed questions, and then took a 15-minute recess. When he came back, his decision was swift. I find in favor of the defendant, Mr. Sanders. The easement language is clear and does not grant the HOA authority to build recreational structures. The HOA committed trespass by building on Mr. Sanders' property without proper authorization. Mr. Sanders was within his rights to remove the unauthorized structure. Karen gasped audibly. Furthermore, Judge Blackburn continued, I find that the HOA engaged in a pattern of harassment against Mr. Sanders following the removal of the bridge. While each individual incident might be minor, the pattern is clear and troubling. He looked directly at Karen. Mrs. Whitmore, as HOA president, you have a responsibility to act reasonably and within the law. You failed to do proper due diligence before approving this project, and you allowed personal animosity to cloud your judgment afterward. This is a cautionary tale about the limits of HOA authority. The judge awarded me my legal fees, which totaled $12,000, plus $5,000 in damages for the harassment and violation of my property rights. He also ordered the HOA to send a letter to all members clarifying the limits of their easement rights and to implement better oversight procedures for future projects. Karen looked like she had been slapped. The other board members looked sick. They were going to have to explain to the entire neighborhood why their dues were going up to pay for Karen's mistakes. But we weren't done yet. 2 weeks after the trial, I got a call from a homeowner named David Reed who lived 3 streets over from me, Mr. Sanders. I heard about your case with the HOA. I think they did something similar to me. What happened? Last year, they cut down 6 trees on my property line without asking me, said they were a hazard to the community. I complained, but they fined me for having an ugly yard after the trees were gone. I ended up paying a landscaper $3,000 to fix it. Did you keep documentation? Everything. Photos, emails, the whole thing. I gave him Michael Chen's number. Within a month, 3 other homeowners had come forward with similar stories of HOA overreach. Michael ended up filing a class action lawsuit on behalf of multiple homeowners. The HOA's insurance company got involved at that point. They were not happy to discover the pattern of behavior. After reviewing the cases, they forced the HOA board to settle all claims and implement strict new policies. Karen Whitmore was asked to resign as president, and when she refused, the insurance company threatened to drop the HOA's coverage. She resigned the next day. The HOA held a special election in January. A retired teacher named Susan Chen, no relation to Michael, ran on a platform of reasonable governance and accountability. She won by a landslide. One of her first acts was to have the HOA's bylaws professionally reviewed and updated to prevent future abuses. Susan called me a few weeks after taking office. Mr. Sanders, I want to apologize on behalf of the HOA for what happened. It was wrong, and it never should have occurred. I appreciate that, I said. I also want you to know we're implementing new procedures. Any construction project, any fine over $50, any legal action has to be approved by a majority of the full board, and homeowners will get written notice and a chance to respond before anything happens. We're also requiring board members to take training on property law and HOA management. That sounds like a good start. I know we can't undo what happened, but I hope we can rebuild trust with you and the other homeowners who were affected. I told her I appreciated the effort, and I meant it. Susan seemed genuine in her desire to fix the problems. As for Karen, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had listed her house for sale. She apparently couldn't stand the embarrassment of facing neighbors who knew what had happened. Part of me felt a little bad about that, but mostly I felt satisfied. Actions have consequences, especially when you abuse a position of power. The creek behind my house is peaceful again. On cool mornings, I take my coffee down there and watch the water flow over the stones. Deer still come to drink at dawn. There's no bridge, no trail, no intrusion. Just my property, my sanctuary, exactly as it should be. I learned a lot through this whole experience. I learned that HOAs can be a nightmare when run by petty tyrants who think their position gives them unlimited authority. I learned that standing up for your rights is expensive and stressful, but sometimes necessary. I learned that documentation is everything. Those cameras and photos and saved emails made all the difference in court. But most importantly, I learned that I wasn't alone. Once I stood up to the HOA, other people found the courage to come forward with their own stories. That's how change happens. One person says no, then another, until the bullies are outnumbered. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. The new HOA board is reasonable and transparent. They focus on actual community needs like road maintenance and snow removal, not vanity projects. They communicate clearly and respect property rights. It's what an HOA should be. Sometimes I walk past where the bridge used to be. The grass has grown back completely, and if you didn't know it was there, you'd never guess. Nature has a way of reclaiming space, of healing over scars. My property is whole again. The $2,000 I got for the lumber went toward my legal fees, but it also felt symbolic. I had taken something that was forced on me without permission and transformed it into something useful on my own terms. That's a small victory, but I'll take it. I keep a photo on my phone of that bridge in the process of being dismantled. Occasionally, I look at it and remember. Remember the fury I felt discovering it. Remember the determination it took to tear it down. Remember the long months of legal battle. Remember the satisfaction of the judge's ruling. It reminds me that I can stand up for myself, that I don't have to accept violations of my rights just because someone with a title says I should. David Reed, the homeowner who called me about the trees, has become a good friend. We get together for beers sometimes and laugh about the whole situation. He calls me the bridge guy, and I call him the tree guy. Our properties are on opposite sides of the development, but we've formed a kind of bond through our shared experience of fighting back. The best part is that the neighborhood itself has changed. People are more engaged now. They actually show up to HOA meetings. They ask questions. They hold the board accountable. The era of rubber stamping whatever Karen wanted is over, replaced by actual community governance. Last month, the new board proposed a legitimate improvement to the walking trail, the existing one that runs through common areas. They presented detailed plans, cost estimates, and sought input from residents. It passed with broad support because they did it right. That's how it's supposed to work. As for me, I've settled back into my quiet life on my 12 acres. I've added more cameras, not because I expect trouble, but because I learned that documentation matters. I keep my property immaculate, partly because I like it that way and partly because I don't want to give anyone ammunition to claim violations. My mailbox is solidly installed with concrete that goes down 3 feet. Nobody's stealing that one. My driveway is clear. My lawn is perfect. My creek flows undisturbed. Everything is exactly as it should be, as it always should have been. I've been asked by a couple of reporters if I wanted to tell my story. One local newspaper did a piece on HOA overreach and interviewed me along with David and the other homeowners. The article sparked some good discussions in the community about the balance between HOA authority and individual property rights. I hope it helps other people who might face similar situations. Michael Chen still represents me on a couple of minor HOA matters, though nothing as dramatic as the bridge case. We've become friendly over time. He told me that my case is now used as an example in some of his property law presentations. The bridge case, he calls it, about the importance of verifying easement rights before undertaking construction projects. I've also become something of an informal advisor to other homeowners in the development who have questions or concerns about the HOA. People call or email asking about their rights, about procedures, about how to challenge decisions. I always tell them to document everything, to read their deed and the bylaws carefully, and to consult a lawyer if they are unsure. I also tell them that sometimes standing up for yourself is worth the hassle. There's a kid in the neighborhood, maybe 10 years old, who likes to fish in the creek where it crosses through the common areas downstream from my property. His name is Tyler, and sometimes he asks if he can fish on my section. I always say yes as long as he asks first. That's the key, asking first, respecting property rights, basic courtesy. I've taught him a few fishing techniques and he's caught some nice bass. Tyler asked me once about the bridge. My mom said there used to be a bridge here and you took it down. Why? Because they built it without asking, I told him. If someone wants to build something on your property, they need your permission. That's an important rule. That makes sense, he said, and went back to fishing. Out of the mouths of babes, right? A 10-year-old kid understands the basic principle that Karen Whitmore and the old HOA board couldn't grasp. I think about that sometimes, about how something so simple became so complicated. Property rights aren't a difficult concept. You own something, you get to decide what happens with it. But people in positions of power sometimes forget that their authority has limits. They start thinking the rules don't apply to them, that they know what's best for everyone, that the ends justify the means. Karen genuinely believed she was improving the community. In her mind, she was the hero, creating better amenities for residents, increasing property values, making the neighborhood more attractive. The fact that she trampled on my rights to do it didn't register because she was so convinced of her righteous purpose. That's the danger of unchecked power, even in something as mundane as a homeowners association. It starts with small overreaches, justified by good intentions. It progresses to larger violations because nobody pushes back. It ends with someone thinking they can do whatever they want because they've gotten away with it for so long. I'm glad I pushed back. I'm glad I didn't just accept it and move on. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, it took months of my life. But it was worth it to establish the principle, to protect my property, and to stop a pattern of abuse that was affecting other people too. The lawsuit settlement money, after legal fees, came to about $8,000. I used it to build a proper gazebo on my property, up on the hill with a view of the creek. I got all the proper permits from the county, followed all the building codes, did everything by the book. It's a beautiful structure with a copper roof and comfortable seating. I sit up there on summer evenings and watch the sunset over the woods. Sometimes I invite people over for barbecues. David comes, and Michael sometimes, and some of my neighbors who became friends through this whole ordeal. We grill steaks, drink beer, and enjoy the view. Nobody builds unwanted structures on anyone's property. It's a nice time. One evening last summer, we were all up in the gazebo when Susan, the new HOA president, walked up. I had invited her too, figuring it was time to move past old conflicts. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around at the gazebo and the view. "You did a great job with this." "Thanks," I said. "I got all the permits," she laughed. "I would expect nothing less. Listen, Robert, I know the HOA put you through hell. I want you to know that we've implemented new policies specifically because of what happened to you. We require legal review of any construction project now. We require property owner consent in writing for anything that touches private property. We have checks and balances." "I appreciate that," I said. "How's it going with the board?" "Good. We've got engaged members, good communication. It's a lot of work, but it's the right way to do it." She paused. "Karen's house sold, by the way. A young family bought it. They seem nice." "Good for them," I said, and I meant it. Fresh start for everyone. The young family who bought Karen's old house turned out to be great neighbors. Their name is Patterson, Mark and Jennifer, with 2 little girls. They introduced themselves shortly after moving in, and I welcomed them to the neighborhood. I didn't mention the history with Karen, figuring they'd hear about it eventually through the grapevine if they were curious. About 2 months after they moved in, Mark came by. "Robert, I heard about what happened with the previous homeowner and the bridge. I just want you to know that we believe in being good neighbors and respecting people's property." "I appreciate that," I said. "Welcome to the neighborhood. If you ever need anything, let me know." That's what it should be about. Neighbors respecting neighbors. Communities working together, not petty tyrants on power trips. I've been asked if I regret buying in an HOA community. Honestly, no. Without the HOA, the roads wouldn't get plowed, the common areas would be a mess, and there'd be no way to handle community-wide issues. HOAs serve a purpose when run properly. The problem isn't the concept, it's the execution. The key is accountability. Board members need to remember they're serving the community, not ruling over it. They need to follow their own bylaws, respect property rights, and act reasonably. When they don't, homeowners need to have the courage to push back. "I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud that I stood up for my rights. I'm proud that it led to positive changes for the whole community. I'm proud that I tore down that bridge and reclaimed my property." Every morning when I walk down to the creek with my coffee, I feel that pride. This is my land, my sanctuary, mine to enjoy, mine to protect, mine to control. Nobody can just build on it because they think it's a good idea. Nobody can violate my rights because they're in a position of authority. The legal system worked, eventually. It was slow and expensive, but it worked. Judge Blackburn understood the law and applied it fairly. Michael knew how to navigate the system. The truth came out, justice was served, and the right outcome prevailed. That's not always guaranteed. I know I was lucky in some ways. I could afford a good lawyer. I had clear documentation. I had a strong case. Not everyone in a similar situation would have those advantages. That's something I think about. I've started attending HOA meetings regularly now. Not because I expect trouble, but because engaged homeowners are the best defense against future problems. I serve on the Architectural Review Committee, helping to ensure that property improvements are done properly and with appropriate permissions. It's boring work, mostly, but important. David serves on the Finance Committee, keeping an eye on how money is spent. Susan is doing a good job as president, but we all remember what happened when Karen had too much unchecked power. Better to stay involved and keep things transparent. The neighborhood has actually improved since all this happened. Property values are up, not because of any bridge or trail extension, but because the community is well managed and residents are engaged. People want to live in places where they have a voice, where their rights are respected, where the HOA serves rather than rules. I've had people from other developments reach out asking for advice on dealing with their own HOA problems. I always tell them the same things. Know your rights, document everything, don't be afraid to get legal help if needed, and stand up for yourself. Most HOA overreach happens because they count on people not fighting back. When you do fight back, and when you're in the right, you'll usually win. That $2,000 I got for the lumber still makes me smile. Karen spent $8,000 of HOA money to build a bridge on my property without permission. I tore it down in a day and sold the materials for $2,000. The symmetry of it is satisfying. They wanted to force something on me, and I literally dismantled it and profited from the pieces. Sometimes I wonder if Karen learned anything from the experience. Probably not, honestly. People like that rarely accept responsibility for their actions. In her mind, she was probably the victim, unfairly attacked for trying to improve the community. That's how bullies always see themselves when someone finally stands up to them. But I learned things. I learned about easement law and HOA regulations. I learned about the court system and property rights. I learned about documentation and evidence preservation. I learned that I'm tougher than I thought, that I can handle conflict when necessary, that I don't back down from a fight when I'm in the right. Most importantly, I learned the value of boundaries. Physical boundaries like property lines and personal boundaries like not accepting violations of my rights. Both matter. Both are worth defending. The creek still flows through my property, clear and cold over smooth stones. Deer still come at dawn. Birds nest in the trees along the bank. Tyler still asks permission to fish sometimes, and I always say yes. Nature doesn't care about property disputes or HOA politics. It just exists, beautiful and indifferent. But I care. I care about this place, about my rights, about doing things the right way. That's why I fought, and that's why I won. Not because I'm special or particularly brave, but because I knew I was right and I refused to accept being wronged. If I could go back and change anything, would I? I don't think so. The whole experience was stressful and unpleasant, but it led to positive changes. The HOA is better now. The community is more engaged. Other homeowners had their grievances addressed. Justice was served. And my property is mine, truly mine in a way it might not have felt if I had just accepted the bridge. I reclaimed it, fought for it, established my ownership beyond any doubt. That matters to me. I'm 62 years old now. I plan to live on this property for the rest of my life. Maybe someday I'll sell it and move somewhere warmer for retirement, but that's years away. For now, this is home. My 12 acres, my house on the hill, my creek running through the woods. All of it mine, all of it protected, all of it exactly as it should be. The gauntlet of dealing with an out-of-control HOA taught me lessons I carry every day. I'm more careful about contracts and agreements. I read everything thoroughly. I keep excellent records. I don't assume people in authority are acting properly just because they hold a position. These might seem like cynical lessons, but they're really just practical. Trust but verify. Hope for the best but document everything. Be friendly but firm about your rights. These principles serve me well in all areas of life, not just dealing with the HOA. The neighborhood kids have a different relationship with me now. I'm the guy who tore down the bridge, which apparently is cool in some circles. Tyler tells his friends stories about it, probably embellished with each retelling. I don't mind. Better to be known as someone who stands up for himself than someone who gets pushed around. The local hardware store owner knows me by name now, after all the tools and supplies I bought during the bridge removal and subsequent property improvements. We chat about projects and property maintenance. He told me once that he'd had his own run-in with an HOA years ago and admired what I did. More people should stand up to them, he said. I've become something of a local character, I suppose. The bridge guy, as David calls me, the man who took on the HOA and won. It's a strange kind of fame, limited to one suburban development in Loudoun County, Virginia, but it's something. What matters most to me is that I can stand in my backyard, look at my creek and feel at peace. No intrusions, no violations, no unauthorized structures. Just my property, my rights, my space. I fought for that and I won, and nobody can take it away from me. The lumber is long gone, sold to that contractor and incorporated into someone else's project. The bridge is a memory, recorded in legal documents and court transcripts. Karen Whitmore is gone, living somewhere else, hopefully having learned something. The old HOA board has been replaced by reasonable people who understand their role and limitations. Everything has changed, and yet here I am, still in the same place, still enjoying the same view, still protecting the same property. That continuity matters. The storm passed, justice prevailed, and life goes on. As I finish writing this whole saga down, sitting in my gazebo with the evening sun casting long shadows across the creek, I feel satisfaction. Not just because I won, though that's part of it. Satisfaction because I did the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. I stood up for my property rights when they were violated. I used the legal system as it was designed to be used. I documented my case and presented it clearly. I didn't back down when pressured. I didn't accept injustice just because fighting it was difficult. I saw it through to the end and achieved the right result. That's something to be proud of. That's something worth remembering. That's the story of how an HOA built a walking bridge over my creek, and I removed it and sold the lumber for scrap, and everything that happened after. My creek flows on, undisturbed and perfect, just as it should be. And I sit here watching it, knowing that I protected it, that I defended what's mine, that I won the fight that needed to be fought. That knowledge, more than any bridge or trail or community improvement, is what makes this place truly valuable to me. This is my sanctuary, my property, my home, and nobody can take that away from me again.